Hello, my name is Ocean. I'm going to be doing the video reflection and analysis assignment. Going to be answering these prompts. What do you think are the top 3 perceptual distortions that employees are most likely to be affected by when forming perceptions of a new manager? So the first thing I think is most important is, first impressions. Obviously, everybody makes their first impressions, when someone walks in the room. People judge you, when a manager walks in, people are going to look at how they're dressing. People are going to look at the way that they talk to people. People are going to look at how they carry themselves. People are going to look at everything. Just like in an everyday situation, there's no way to get around the judging of, everybody. So first impressions are definitely number 1, most important. First impressions are going to stick, even if they're wrong. So you got to be careful about that. I mean, there's nothing you can really do besides just, try to be the best you can be. And the second, I would say, would be stereotypes. Just people are going to assume things based on your gender, being a boy or a girl, as simple as that. People are going to assume things based on how old you are, People are going to assume that you're young. If you're young, you don't know what you're doing, but it definitely could be wrong. There's a lot of young people know how to handle things very well, and that's why stereotypes are, dangerous. Same with first impressions, So people are going to play favorites, people are going to make assumptions, and, it's going to block trust. These assumptions can block the trust before a manager even proves themselves. And that's just, the way life goes. And the third one is something that I've been reading about online. It's called the halo effect, or the horn effect. And that's basically like if a manager does one thing that's either really well or really bad, people are gonna just, it's kind of all ties together, like a first impression, stereotype. They're gonna assume that everything's great. Like if you come in and you're good and you're doing a presentation and you're being really nice, and people are gonna assume, oh wow, this is gonna be easy peasy, like they're nice, they're understanding, and then next day it might be different. Some things just aren't always the way they look, the first time you see them, and they might actually be a really terrible boss. And I'm sure we've all experienced things like this where someone might have been really, like, I've had a manager be really nice to me like the first couple days, and then just kind of stopped being nice to me. I don't know if it was something I did, particularly, or there's nothing I can really put my finger on, and maybe she just was being nice the first 2 days and then just kind of went to her regular self. I'm not completely sure, but that happens all the time, and we just have to be mindful. So don't just view everything off of one occurrence. These distortions affect teamwork and morale, so being aware of them is very important. That's the first step of being aware of these things, like first impressions, stereotyping, the halo effect, the horn effect. It's just being aware that they are here, and we have to try to stay away from doing that kind of stuff. So the next prompt I'm going to talk about is, avoiding the fundamental attribution error. So this happens when we blame someone's personality instead of their situation. So we're not really taking a second to think what's going on behind scenes. Like, for example, if someone is late, it's easy to just think, oh, they're lazy, they don't care about this job. But, in reality, something personal is going on in their life, probably, or could be. It is not always that way, but it could be something personal in their life going on. I always try to put myself in other people's shoes. I don't want to just assume anything. You don't want to just get upset with somebody because of one thing. You might later find out that something else was going on. And it might change the way you look at the situation. Like, somebody's home life might not be so well. They could be living out of their car, and there's plenty of things that are happening, and at least they're trying, and at least they're putting in the effort. If it looks like they're putting in the effort and they're executing, then that's what's important. You know what I mean? They're getting the job done. Another thing I do is like focus on patterns. Not just one event. If something just happens once, I wouldn't just label that person right away and be like, just like a judgment, I wouldn't try to just judge people. It's nice to stay fair and be professional and keep your relationship strong with people, just like you would want people to do for you. If I'm sure everybody's been in situations in their life where things were not always going the way they should. So we can all take a second and just try to be understanding. I think that's very important when you're a manager or when you're in the situation in any work environment. So prompt 3, positive reinforcement. At work, it's very important if you're a manager to focus on positive things. I think people often forget about reminding people when they're doing good. Same with parents, it's kind of the same thing. You should always remind your employees that they're doing good. Point it out when they're doing good, not just, it's so easy to just remind people when they're doing bad and tell people to stay on top of things, which you should do that too, but don't forget when they're doing good to remind them about that and say something about that too, because that's, it's important to people when they hear that, like a high five, any little like good job, like, oh, I see what you're doing, I appreciate that. Those little things really mean a lot to people, and I just think that's important. And other things is like positive reinforcement, obviously, bonuses, time off, growth opportunities like training or promotions. I think it's great when, people give people the opportunity to grow in situations like this. Like, a training opportunity is great. Like, if I love to just have as many, positions in my pocket. I can know how to do everything. Like, say somebody was sick one day and they needed me to fill in. Now I've already been trained to do that. I know how to do that. I can help out. I feel like you're investing in me. People feel like you're investing in them. They feel like you trust them. They feel like we're part of a family. It's very important to, make people feel valued and, giving people more responsibility instead of just praising them, Yes, it's good to say that you're doing a good job, but to actually show it and give you more responsibilities makes you feel valued. It makes you feel like you're investing in me and I can invest in your company, and we're just going back and forth with the positiveness. And positive reinforcement builds confidence and it encourages people to do their best. It makes me want to help you out just like you're helping me out. It's just like the same thing. We're helping each other out, and it's all a good environment, and that's like the best that you can do, really. It's great to make people feel like you believe in them. You want to make employees feel like you believe in them, you see potential, because nobody wants to waste their time at a job all day when the, management just seems like they don't believe in you and they just kind of are using you as a, like a schmuck. They're just using you, And nobody wants to feel like they're being used. They want to feel like they're being valued and like you can see their potential, and that's important. Positive reinforcement, training, time off, bonuses, all small things to help people feel valued and help employees feel like they want to be there and they want to be a part of your company. Prompt 4, company culture using Bandura's social cognitive effect. So Bandura's theory, I guess, is kind of how I said earlier, like parents and children, like managers, employees are going to be watching the managers and seeing how they behave. And I guess this theory is saying that, in companies where managers embarrass employees and they play favorites and they encourage taunting, is a toxic culture and is a toxic environment, and it will start to grow and manifest and, become a whole thing. And employees will start to learn that being aggressive and sneaky is going to help you strive. So instead of being being teamwork, instead of wanting to do positive stuff, they're going to start to compete with each other, and they're going to avoid taking risks because they're scared of being criticized also. And they're going to blame other people to avoid the criticism. Morale will be very low and the trust will disappear. There will be no trust because nobody wants to be, the one that's being talked about and, embarrassed. Nobody wants to be embarrassed. People want to be encouraged. So that is making a very poor work environment. You probably won't have employees that want to stick around long. I wouldn't want to. A new employee walking in the building is going to, try to fit in at first and be like, hey, let me try to get ahead. I might just stay quiet and report things and tattletale to the manager, just like the manager's doing. I'm just going to copy the manager's behavior because that's the environment that he's putting me in. This might help them in short term, but in long term, it's not going to help them, and it wouldn't help the company. So it might be better, for the long term, the company would suffer, but it would cause burnouts, low loyalty. Like I said, nobody's going to want to stay in a situation like that, and no healthy person would want to put up with that. And it's going to cause burnouts, it's going to hurt productivity, and it's eventually going to hurt profits. And a culture like this is teaching bad behavior, the wrong behavior. Is going to damage the organization over time, and no, it's not helping anybody doing that. So overall, I would try to avoid that, try to be positive, enforce a positive environment, do all the good things you can do in a work environment. So yeah, staying positive, giving people positive reinforcement. Yeah. So don't play favorites. That's never good. I would never encourage that. I would always treat everybody equally, give everybody the right opportunities and the right chances, And if somebody does put you in a situation where they're talking about another employee, I wouldn't try to praise them for doing that. I would kind of just, I wouldn't really pay attention to it unless it's made a problem. I don't, obviously if it's something serious, you're going to have to look into it, but I wouldn't praise anybody for telling you about something that's going on. It just seems kind of childish. I think that people should just worry about themselves, try to do good, and that's all that anybody can do, really, is just make a good environment. Don't be the manager that's encouraging that kind of behavior. Encourage good behavior. Encourage, pay attention to people that are doing good, and that's all you can do. Don't, try to don't mind the negative, you know, talk about the positive. So yeah, I hope you got something from that, and I can't wait to hear what everybody else has to say. Thank you for watching my video.